Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Always glad to have with us Eric Griffith from PCMag.com. Lots to talk about this morning with Eric. Thank you for joining us.
Always happy to be here. You know that.
Let's start out with this. This is from the BBC. Trump launches fresh attack on Apple over privacy issues. He tweeted that Apple was refusing to unlock the phones for Attorney General William Barr. And Barr wanted to get into the phones used by the Saudi suspects accused of shooting up the naval base in Pensacola, Florida in early September. And the BBC article points out this is not the first time this has happened between Apple and government investigators. They say this happened also in San Bernardino, California in 2015. After a mass shooting there, Apple refused to help gain access to the suspect's phone.
Well, there's a couple things at play here. First off, it's an easy target for the president to go after a big company like Apple. Apple obviously is a behemoth. They make billions of dollars. They're no saint necessarily, but they are a company that, at the very least, is looking out, in this case, I would say, for the privacy of all of us to a large extent, because they don't want to provide a backdoor for the access to their phones, because it's not something that just the so-called good guys would use. They are correct when they say that it would be exploited by others. People are going to find out about it. You know, there's no police department or governmental agency that, if they had a magical backdoor into Apple phones, that isn't going to somehow leak out or get out and let other people take advantage of it and put everybody's phones at risk. Now, that said, I don't really believe that Apple necessarily is that super strong with their encryption and security that other people can't break through this. And in fact, I'm pretty sure with the San Bernardino thing that a third-party company came through for the law enforcement agency in question, and I think got people into that phone. And if I'm not remembering about that one correctly, it's certainly happened with some other cases like this. So what they're doing is that they're using it as a way to attack Apple on something that isn't that big an issue, because there are other places out there that can probably break into that phone.
Eric writes for PCMag.com, the 10 most pirated movies.
Oh yeah, this is my weekly update. I get to always write up like what the 10 most illegally downloaded movies, at least according to the website Torrent Freak. They put out a list every week of all the films, and they generally are incredibly popular things that, you know, you're not going to be surprised to find that, say, the number one movie that people illegally download this past week was Joker, which was controversial, but now it's becoming also kind of mainstream. It has been nominated for 11 Oscars. So it's kind of like, you know, the modern-day Taxi Driver with a little bit of comic book movie thrown into it. I haven't seen it myself. It doesn't sound like my kind of thing. I like my superhero comic book movies to actually have heroes in them as opposed to just bad guys. But, you know, that's me. I'm a little crazy that way.
Looking through your articles here, Eric, and, you know, at the top of PC Mag, and I see a link that says Race to 5G. Could you tell our listeners what 5G is for those who don't know, and how close are we to getting 5G on the cell phone and mobile devices, Eric?
Well, yeah, 5G is literally the next generation of wireless networks. Like right now, what we're pretty much all using, 4G LTE, which is kind of like a souped-up 4G. That's at the very best, and of course, in a lot of areas, you can't even get that. 5G would be the next step up. It's a little more complicated than that. You know, it's very it's easy to oversimplify when you're talking about 4G to 5G. You would think it's just a quick step up. It's not. It requires a lot of work by all of the major phone carriers to do major upgrades to their equipment, to the back end. You have to have phones that support this kind of thing, though, the most modern phones from Apple and Samsung and so forth, they'll all support it when they're in range of a signal that has that kind of thing. But we are not really that close. I mean, major cities are getting it. Chicago, New York, LA. You can go to those places and you can signal. I was in New York City not that long ago, and I looked down at my iPhone and said, hey, wow, 5G. Doesn't really mean anything, that it didn't change anything for how my phone worked or make anything really that more advanced for me outside of possibly making it a little better to, like, download a Netflix movie while I was on a train going into the city, that kind of thing.
Eric, what are the liberal objections to 5G? Because I've seen them on Facebook. Different liberal friends of mine have, it seems to be kind of environmentalist concerns.
I gotta say, that's news to me. I haven't heard anything about any particular liberal or conservative issues about 5G. I mean, everybody wants to have faster and, more range. So, that's what 5G is meant to deliver. If there's any issue at all, it's that the companies who are running it, are not necessarily the most trustworthy or beloved companies. We're talking about Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint and T-Mobile, whatever they're going to call themselves when they're all married and teamed up and happy. So, that could be an issue there, is that it's in the hands of a small amount of people. But, overall, I'd say that there are big issues with a lot of telecommunications, and people, and certainly liberals have some issues with things coming out of the Ajit Pai's group over there at the FTC and all that. But I don't think that 5G would be one that anybody is going to have too much of an issue with.
Okay, actually, I found it on Robert Kennedy Jr.'s website, talking about 5G and the enthusiasm for it. The rollout of blazing fast 5G technology will increase the number of transmitters sending signals. This could mean catastrophic health effects. And they talked about it's being done without prior study to the health impact or concern with anyone's safety. Early warnings. Giant uncontrolled experiment on children and adults has already begun, referring to 5G and health problems such as insomnia, miscarriage, memory problems, and other neurological issues are possible. Your thoughts to that?
Well, this is the kind of thing that happens to come out whenever there's a new wireless technology. I mean, I remember when I started writing about Wi-Fi 15, almost 20 years ago, people were very concerned. There were a lot of articles about how Wi-Fi was making people sick, that kind of thing. I remember people talking about electromagnetic radiation from monitors, from computers back in the 90s. I'm sure that to an extent there's a real thing, and maybe it's hurting a very small subset of people. But just in my heart, I can't really believe that this is something that's on the scope of, like, people taking up smoking in such mass quantities in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, or even the electronic cigarettes and the Juuls of today, which were putting people's health at risk. It's not quite, to me, on the same level. I could be wrong, and there could be studies that come out very, very soon that make me look like an utter fool for ever trusting 5G, and maybe my own head will be filled with all sorts of tumors because of this phone and the earbuds that I'm talking to you through right now, which are using Bluetooth. But I'm having a hard time thinking that it's going to end up being too big a deal.
Talking to Eric Griffith from PC Mag. Back to your articles, Eric, the best brands for 2020. And you start out talking about NPS, a net Promoter Score, and you talked about the companies that you test there at PC Mag. Tell us about this article, Eric.
So the Net Promoter Score is this very interesting thing that was come up with by some marketing-type people. They created a way for you, any business really, to ask their customers, how are we doing, and would you recommend us to your friends and family and colleagues? And you're then asked to just pick a number between 0 and 10. If you say that that company is worth a 9 or a 10, then you're considered a promoter. If you say the company is a 0 to I believe it's a 6, then you're considered a detractor. And that's somebody who is not saying nice things about the company in question. And then, the 7 or 8, you're just kind of passive. You don't really love them or hate them. So the Net Promoter Score is literally taking the percentage of people who are promoters minus the percentage of people who are demoters and coming up with a number between negative 100 and 100. And the number, the higher it is, means the better you are doing in the eyes of your customers. And we do surveys all year long at PC Mag where we ask people, what do you think of this company, say, who makes a printer or who makes a laptop or who makes a phone or who makes or who is your ISP, something like that. All of those are asked year-round, and then we collect them together in this best brand story every year. These are all the best brands going into 2020, and there's some surprises in there. Microsoft is considered the best brand laptop, say over Apple, over Dell, but yet Apple won for the best desktop over companies like Dell, and Apple also won for tablets, and there's a few surprises and some not so surprising things in there. Consumer Cellular, which is a very nice little carrier that uses somebody else's network. I think they might use the AT&T network, or actually T-Mobile. They got an 85 for a Net Promoter Score, which is an astronomically large number. That means so many people are saying nice things about Consumer Cellular, and so few people are saying bad things about it, that it is a highly, highly recommended company, and everybody should give it a thought when they are going out to pick their next carrier for their phone.
Talking to Eric Griffith from PC Mag. Let's take a quick break, check the forecast. We'll be back in just a moment, continuing on with Eric's article. Stay with us.
Looking for a night of belly-aching laughter? Saturday, January 25th, join famed comedian Dan Viola, whose experience includes working with Jon Stewart and Stephen Wright at the Main Place, Main Street in Hornell for the Care First Hospice fundraiser, The Greatest Variety Show. Saturday, January 25th at 6 p.m. This night of talent will include local celebrity judges and Penny Smith as the MC. Your $40 ticket includes dinner with proceeds to benefit the Care First Hospice programs in Hornell. You won't want to miss out. Buy your tickets online at carefirstny.org today.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carroll. Hey, Rob, a little snow out there this morning.
Yes, indeed. And, Brian, do you know last night Hornell beat Leroy 57-42?
I did know that, Rob.
Oh, that's good. Well, I just wanted to make sure. Otherwise, Brian, you're right. We got a little bit of light snow out there this morning in a few spots. It's associated with a very weak storm system northwest of Albany. That's going to go move across New England later today and redevelop offshore. What it means for us is some periods of light snow. A few spots could pick up an inch or so. Looks like temperatures today are going to tend to be right around 35. And we'll also know to become breezy as the day goes on. That storm is going to intensify quite a bit in the Atlantic later today, and that's why we're going to see the relatively strong winds. Now, we'll have scattered snow showers tonight. We're going to be breezy. Lows will be turning colder, 10 to 15 overnight. Turning partly sunny tomorrow with a high of only 20 to 25. Clouds and breezy tomorrow night, lows 10 to 15. Light snow mixed with sleet and rain on Saturday, 35 to 40. Some leftover snow showers on Sunday. Brian, sunrise this morning was at 7:36. The sun will set tonight at 5:03.
Back with Eric Griffith from PCMag.com. Continuing with your articles here. The 11 best original TV shows on Hulu. You did the same for Amazon there. The 11 best original Amazon Prime Video TV shows. Let's start out with Hulu, Eric.
Yeah, Hulu has come a long, long way from being, what many would have called an also-ran kind of video streaming service back in the day. I mean, Netflix was always where it was at. But they started investing a little bit more money, and now they make a lot of really great original programming. I mean, probably the top of the heap, of course, is the Handmaid's Tale, which is just a phenomenal show for anybody to be watching. They've won multiple Emmys, but there's a lot of great stuff. They do a lot of fantastic adaptations of Stephen King material. They got a Marvel TV show on there called Runaways, which is, kids of supervillains who ran away from home so they could fight their parents. There's some really good shows on Hulu, and for the people who don't know it out there, Hulu used to be owned by a lot of TV networks, and it was a great place to go watch TV like the day after it aired, so you could watch it on your own schedule if you didn't want to pay for cable. Well, now it's almost all majority owned by Disney. A lot of those deals are still in place, so you can still watch the TV shows the next day, but more and more in the coming years, you're going to probably see a lot more Disney content on there, and original content, because obviously Disney's got all the money in the world, so they're going to make a lot of original stuff.
The 10 best Netflix original TV series for geeks. I like that title.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, I wrote up a top 10 list of the very best shows on Netflix just overall. But let's face it, I mean, the audience at PC Mag and, maybe the internet at large, a lot of us are just geeks and nerds who love our fantasy, sci-fi, crazy stuff. And, I'm definitely on that list. So I wrote up this quick list of just the sci-fi, fantasy, horror, weird stuff that, your grandparents might not be into it, but, if they've got any taste and they read some Vonnegut and Heinlein back in the day, they probably are. And, the top of the very best you can find on Netflix is really Stranger Things. If anybody hasn't followed that, I mean, it's a TV show that is like a perfect mashup of what would have happened if Stephen King and Steven Spielberg had got together in the 1980s and made a TV show. That's what Stranger Things is. And the company behind it, the people who are the creators of it, they're called the Duffer Brothers. Those two guys have made a really perfect mashup of those kinds of genres. It feels like an 80s horror movie meets Back to the Future meets Indiana Jones. It's pretty fantastic.
Eric, 18 Rocking, Apple Music streaming tips. For those who download music with Apple, tell us what's new there.
Well, Apple Music streaming is, it came along, 3-4 years ago, and it's been a pretty fantastic service that really what it's meant to do is take on Spotify. Spotify came into the United States kind of out of nowhere and really gave people a new sense of how music can be curated and dealt with. You pay a subscription fee, $10 a month, and you have access to, I believe it's 30 million songs, on a service like Spotify. Well, Apple already had a giant catalog of music because it owned iTunes, and, it was the first one to bring the Beatles to digital music. That was a really big deal. So, of course, it was going to launch a competitor to Spotify, and Apple Music is it. And it's very tightly integrated into owning an iPhone or an iPad or even probably an Apple TV box on your TV that you can use for streaming other video. But this is the cream of the crop of the music. And now, since the first time I wrote this story was a few years ago, it's been updated since then. Apple Music now offers 60 million songs. So if you're spending that $9.99 per month, that's how many songs you have access to. It's practically an unlimited catalog, and I would probably, if you wanted to listen to every single one of those songs, it would take you the rest of your life and several other lives.
Eric, how much does YouTube, with all the songs that are on YouTube, hurt? How much does YouTube hurt, Apple and Amazon and companies like that?
Well, there's a couple of schools of thought about that. I mean, certainly, yes, there are a lot of songs up on YouTube that probably are, what you could consider pirated. They're just everyday people taking their favorite songs, putting them up on YouTube. Anybody can find them. Anybody can play them. You can listen to music all day long on YouTube, essentially for free, never pay for anything. And that is a legit concern for companies like Spotify and Apple. to an extent. But the argument is that a lot of places that fight this kind of piracy, they don't really go into it. And certainly the Recording Industry Association of America, who used to fight it tooth and nail and would sue your grandmother, literally would sue your grandmother if they thought your grandmother was like illegally downloading a song as an MP3. They did it in the past and probably wish they could do it again. But the research tended to show more often than not that the piracy was not eating into the profits of the recording industry because the people who liked those songs, if they really liked them enough, would tend to go out and buy them anyway. I mean, the people that were suffering, to be perfectly honest, were the artists, the people who were actually doing the music, because they're giving up their rights to these giant corporations and these labels and so forth. They were not getting the money flowing down to them as they should have. So, they end up having to do a lot of work of going on the road and performing, which, is grueling, but it would at least keep them solvent to an extent until they could make the next thing that they had to give up to a big corporation to try to get it out there so that everybody could hear about it. And the pirates, in theory, just helped them spread the word.
Taylor Swift situation, you kind of brought up something that reminded me of Taylor Swift and her argument with her agent / old producer there. Did you have any thoughts on that controversy of Taylor Swift losing the rights to a lot of her music?
Well, I mean, she not only had that issue, but, Taylor Swift was one of the first ones who kind of, argued the point that I just made when she, with the music that she did have control over, pulled her entire catalog off of Spotify at one point and told them, you can't have any of my music because you're not paying artists. And maybe it was Apple. I forget which one of those services. And so, she was one of the first to recognize the fact that there were a lot of people getting the shaft from these big companies who were getting, that $10 a month from millions of people really adds up, but it wasn't going to the people who were the creators. Now, her losing her rights to her other music, that is a huge problem for an artist like that. I mean, she's going to be okay. She's Taylor Swift. She's going to be able to make new music. She's going to do other things. But there are smaller artists out there who that could have been, their entire life's output, and they don't have necessarily the success and the other ways of making money that a Taylor Swift does.
Eric, I was going to bring up Bad Boys for Life, Doolittle in 1917. I don't think we can do that in 60 seconds, though. Running low on time. Well, all right. You pick one of them.
Hey, Dr. Doolittle, number one, Rex Harrison. He was the only Dr. Doolittle for me, even though I do love Eddie Murphy. But I will probably give Iron Man a chance to talk to animals. Yes, I will.
All righty. With that, we have to go. Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Always happy to be here. You take care of yourself.